Welcome back to My View. 3 years into Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, and fighting still rages on. Vladimir Putin just launched Russia's largest missile and drone assault of the war, leaving behind a trail of devastation. President Trump has been blunt. Putin's playing with fire, escalating a war that should never have started in the first place. But the hard truth is, diplomacy doesn't happen with friends. It happens with adversaries. So what does it take to bring two enemies to the table and find a way forward when trust is in such short supply? That's where General Keith Kellogg comes in. As special envoy for Ukraine, he's on the front lines of difficult negotiations to push back against Putin's aggression. I sat down with General Kellogg to talk about what it takes to find a path to peace and why, as he told me, this war won't be won through more bloodshed, but through bold diplomacy backed by strength. This is obviously a very interesting time in the geopolitical sphere. So to have you here as a special envoy to Russia and Ukraine, I think is huge. President Trump says something has happened to Vladimir Putin. Have you noticed with your counterpart in Russia a change as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, Laura, thanks for having me. Good to be with you. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
I think what I've seen is some intransigence on the part of Putin and his negotiation team that he sent it to Istanbul recently, and sort of like, where's the reasonableness? Because what the president has done, he's laid out a very reasonable plan, which we brought back out of London, and we came up with what the term I use is term sheets. The Russians call it memorandum. It's basically, okay, this is what it looks like. Is this acceptable to you? And then we get their term sheet. This is okay for you. This is not okay for you. How do we bring it together until we get to what I call a ceasefire? And I use the term comprehensive ceasefire. And that's defined to me as air, sea, land, and infrastructure. The Russians right now, I mean, we can't get their term sheet. We haven't got it yet. They promised President Trump, Putin did, that he'd have it within a week. A week later, it didn't show up. So I said, okay, so I kind of need to know what your start point is. We worked really hard after being in London that we kind of came up with these 22 points that they, agreed to. And I said, I think the reason why I thought it was pretty good is neither side really liked it 100%. But I credit your father-in-law for having the courage to go out and do something and talk to him. He's done more in 120 days than President Biden did in 1,211 days. So I said, it's really pretty impressive what he's done by even getting the sides to sit down and talk.
Do you feel confident that we will see the pieces fall into place ultimately for an end to this war?
Well, I do, because I have great faith in your father-in-law. I mean, I think if anybody can do this, it's President Trump. Everybody's working really hard to get this to an end state, because we understand, the death out there on the battlefield. I mean, Laura, the term I use, it's industrial strength killing. Right now, conservatively, we're talking Ukrainian and Russian military members killed and wounded is over 1.2 million. That is a stunning number. I mean, it's something that we cannot comprehend. The Russians have historically absorbed losses like this. They don't blink. And that's what's kind of scary to me. We need to stop this killing. The killing needs to stop, because the escalatory issues are still there. The fact that Chancellor Merz has said, well, I'm going to give the Ukrainians the Taurus missile system. Well, that's like a Tomahawk land attack missile in miniature form. It's got a significant warhead to it. It travels, roughly 300 miles, which means you can penetrate deep into Russian space. Putin has made those comments. Well, if you're going to supply them with weapons, we continue to be part of the aggressor. And he considers this a proxy war by NATO as well right now. And frankly, in a way it is. I mean, when you look at what the European nations have done with support, I mean, it's clearly Putin sees that. So everybody's got to be willing to step back a bit. They've got to be willing to give a little bit. And they've got to say, okay, I'm willing to give up this part of the discussion to get us to an end state. And that's where the dialogue is so very important. Show me that you're willing to kind of say, I'm willing to take this hard step of lowering the level of violence. And then I said, okay, it gives us an opening where we want to go to. But tell us where that is. The prison exchange, which I thought was really magnificent. And that was done between Medinsky and Umarov of the Ukrainians. And that was important. I mean, getting 1,000 prisoners on each side released, I mean, those are fathers to mothers and they have children, wives. Getting them back home after 2, 3, 4 years of war was rather significant. President Trump mentioned that to President Putin, that he wants the children back as well. That showed some real sensitivity on President Trump's part. And Putin wasn't against that, but we like to, I mean, we're talking 20, 30,000 children. We've got to get some breathing space, and I'd say reasonableness on the part of the Russians. Again, we've got it on one side, we need it on the other side, and bring it together.
Well, we'll hope for the best on that.
Me too.
President Trump is very clear. He wants to put America first and the American people first. Where do we stand on a policy like that?
It is America first, because I think when you look at the grand scope of things, when you look at the world condition we're in, it's not a condition that President Trump left from his last term, because we didn't have the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, and the Chinese all together. They were fragmented. They were apart because he kept them apart. And I think it's a much more dangerous world than President Trump left a little over 4 years ago, because of the actors involved, and the actors are working in concert. The concern about escalatory violence is there. And I would say to President Trump, sir, you're the president, not me. You're the one who got the Electoral College votes. I didn't get any. And you get to make those decisions, but we owe it to you, and we owe it to the American people to give our best advice. And to you, everything he does has the American people in his thoughts. I know that. I've seen it. You know that.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's why the American people really do love him. I think his instincts are off the charts good. I mean, they really are.
As a veteran, I know you've spent decades serving our country. We're incredibly grateful for all that you've done. I wonder what your message would be for someone watching right now who might be considering a career in military service.
Yeah. Well, I'd say to him, it's probably a pretty good place to be right now. They've got a great commander-in-chief who's always going to have their back. If I was back in uniform, I'd say, okay, I can fight for this guy as my commander-in-chief. And my youngest son is still in uniform. And he kind of echoes what I say. He said the same thing, you know, hey, Dad, this is somebody that, you know, when he makes the hard call, that, you know, we're going to hook up, ruck up, and go into the fight. We're pretty confident about that.
In 2021, you wrote, "The inability to love a nation and unwillingness to fight for her is a national security threat." Maybe expand on that a little bit and tell me how it's applicable right now.
Well, it's because that's how this nation was formed. You know, Lexington Green, when common citizens were willing to grab their muskets and go fight at that time the biggest and best, the British Army, the biggest and best army in the world, and were fearless about it because they saw something greater than themselves. And that's kind of what I'm saying. That's what's important. If you're willing to do that, you're willing to commit something greater to yourself. It's an ideal. America's an ideal. And I go back to what Ronald Reagan said, this shining city on a hill. And you got the same feeling that you get with President Trump as you do with Reagan, that he had America's back. And he used words, because words are also a weapon. And he uses words so very, very well. President Trump and Reagan did both.
We're appreciative of all you're doing and wishing you the best of luck in all of your negotiations for peace.
Well, thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.